Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook video for today, Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. And starting off on today's tropical weather outlook, the CSU, Colorado State University, has updated their hurricane season forecast for the Atlantic. Yesterday, we went over tropical storm risk from the UK that updated their hurricane forecast for the month of July. And today, CSU did it. And interestingly enough, just like TSR, which we went over yesterday, they slightly downgraded their numbers in all of their categories. In June, if you do not remember what their forecast was, they had 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes, and they predicted a total ACE of 155 points. And for their July forecast, they now predict 16 storms, 8 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. And I said before, but I'm very skeptical as to why a lot of people are doing it, especially now that we just got 3 named storms within the past several weeks since late June. And we are a full month ahead of schedule, especially when it comes to the named storm department. I can maybe understand slightly lowering the hurricane and major hurricane numbers, but at least with named storms, I don't know. I think a lot of people that are starting to slowly begin to downcast this season, I just don't really understand it, especially given that we already have 3 named storms on the books, especially after everybody said that we would enter the month of July without a single storm at all, and we're not even done with the first third of the month, and we already had our first 3 named storms. But that's just me, but of course we'll see if they do end up being right. Let's take a look, though, at what's happening right now. Obviously, nothing happening in the Atlantic, and that it's going to remain that way probably for the next short-term future, but we're going to go over beyond the next 7 days. We might have to watch for something else to develop before the month is over and we head into the month of August, but I'll show you that in just a moment. And the Eastern Pacific, finally, for the first time in a long time, we officially do not have anything on the tropical weather bulletin for the next week, although maybe there could be some other development that we might get, but the Eastern Pacific is finally quiet down. It's about time, especially since they've been pumping out storms since the early part of last month. As I've been saying, it only was going to be a matter of time before they were finally going to quiet down, and it looks like it is finally happening. Here's a satellite imagery of what is going on right now across the Atlantic, and there's really not much of anything to talk about. A few showers and thunderstorms here in the Bahamas, and I mentioned several days ago that this was a part of some of the European ensembles showing something trying to get going off the southeast coast once again, but they since dropped it, and no development is now expected. And now we're just going to have showers and thunderstorms for the Bahamas, and also some maybe showers and thunderstorms over Florida and the general southeastern United States. And then obviously here in the eastern Atlantic, there's really not much of anything to talk about at all. I mean, we have a tropical wave that is coming off the coast of Africa. Looks pretty strong, but it's probably going to fizzle out and weaken as it moves on into the Atlantic because it's very dry out here. Lots of Saharan air being pumped off the continent of Africa, as typical for this time of year, and I'll show you here on the Saharan air map, pretty much encompassing the entire MDR right now, stretching all the way from the coast of Africa into the western Atlantic up till the islands, and the Saharan air certainly also has an effect on the skies in the islands too, and also throughout the Caribbean, because sometimes, especially with these very strong Saharan air outbreaks, the air and the dust is able to make it all the way to the Caribbean and even sometimes into the southeast as well. But eventually, you'll start to notice over the next several weeks as we move through the month of July and begin to move into the early parts of August, you will start to see that the Saharan air will lift northward, and maybe you can already argue that it's starting to happen at least here in the far southeastern portion of the eastern Atlantic, and it's going to slowly happen. And as we head into August, the Saharan air is going to clear out, and eventually things will be less dusty and the environment will be more favorable for especially tropical waves out here in the deep tropics to be able to get their act together and potentially form and become deep tropical, maybe sometime, maybe a few long track storms, especially as we head into the peak of the season. But obviously, for now, that is not happening. And another factor to that is the velocity potential. And this is an average of the past 90 days of velocity potential in the entire world. And this definitely explains as to why the Atlantic, at least deep tropics wise, has not been favorable. Take a look at the velocity potential here, especially in the Atlantic. Quite a bit of sinking air as represented by these brown and kind of beige colors here. And meanwhile, all of the rising motion, as you can see, has been in the Pacific. This is where you see all these green and especially dark green and I guess turquoise shadings here. And so this explains pretty decently as to why the Eastern Pacific has been quite a bit active, especially since the beginning of the month. And I've said this, that especially early on when the Atlantic is not favorable and we have our tropical waves coming out of Africa, they tend to not develop in the Atlantic, but especially because conditions earlier on tend to be more favorable in the Eastern Pacific, we often see tropical waves making their way through the Atlantic and finally getting into more favorable conditions in the Eastern Pacific. And that's what's been happening over the past several weeks. And it looks like that generally holds true, especially when you look at the velocity potential. But obviously, we'll have to watch over the next several weeks to see how this changes. And there are indications that it will change, especially as we head towards the end of the month and heading into the month of August, that things might become more favorable, especially out here in the deep tropics in the Atlantic. But obviously, for now, the pattern is definitely unfavorable, and it makes sense as to why things, at least deep tropics wise, have not been favorable. And I mean, if you look at storms like Andrea and especially Chantal, they really formed from extratropical or non-tropical influence. Chantal formed from the back end of a front, and Andrea was a small little system out in the open central Atlantic that also formed from non-tropical origins. Barry, I guess you could say, was a tropical origin system, but obviously definitely didn't form out here in the Eastern Atlantic because conditions are not favorable. And of course, we'll have to watch once again as we head over the next several weeks to see how this changes, especially as we head into the peak of the hurricane season. But at least for the next week or so, just really quickly going through the GFS, at least over the next week, nothing popping up in the Atlantic. Obviously, nothing of major talks, nothing trying to consolidate, nothing, no vorticity that's trying to bundle and consolidate and become circular as we typically watch, especially with the vorticity signatures when looking at the GFS. Although we do see it here in the Eastern Pacific, and this roughly happens about 5 days out. Something here tries to develop in the Eastern Pacific, but at least on the GFS, luckily, it remains out to sea. So maybe we'll probably get an area of interest tagged here in the Pacific, but at least in the Atlantic, nothing major at least. Maybe some sort of low pressure, and I saw this, and this kind of goes a little bit beyond the 7-week time frame. You could definitely see maybe there's some sort of low pressure that seems to be here in the Gulf of Mexico, and also originates just like Chantal from some sort of frontal system, and a low pressure breaks off and ends up kind of dilly-dallying around. And that actually brings me to my final point, my final slide that I want to show you for today. This is the Global Tropical Hazards Outlook by the Climate Prediction Center, and this is what they released yesterday, and especially for week 2, so this is beyond the typical 7 days that we talk about. Notice that they have a hatched area of potential development here in the Gulf of Mexico, and I just indicated to you that the GFS kind of shows something here. And the Europe yesterday, also long range, indicated at something potentially forming in the Gulf, especially as we head into the last third of the month. And my only thing I can really say right now is the Gulf of Mexico is very warm, and the deep tropics is not favorable right now. So obviously we won't be expecting things off from the deep tropics, but these frontal systems, as again, with Chantal. Chantal originated from these frontal systems that move off the coast of the United States, and then we have these low pressures that break off from the southern ends of the front, and then depending on if conditions are favorable, they're able to consolidate and develop and become tropical systems. And sometimes they happen off the southeast coast, like we saw with Chantal, and sometimes they happen in the Gulf of Mexico. And it looks like, according to at least some models, there's some hints that maybe we might get a chance of that to happen as we head into the next several weeks here in the month of July. So we'll have to see if we do get any more development before the month of July is over, which I'm pretty sure will happen. And obviously, I will keep you up to date on when that happens. But for now, not much else happening in the tropics, which is obviously a good thing, especially because there is a lot happening United States weather related wise, not tropical related. So luckily we don't have to deal with the tropics for now. And once again, it looks like it'll stay that way at least for the next week. With that being said, I'm going to end it off for today's video. Hope you enjoyed what you saw today. If you did, obviously leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you are new, as I always say. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I will talk again and be back with you with more tomorrow.